The macabre clown returns to continue tormenting Signature Company, the most outrageous part of all, and the one that gets the most interesting. This story begins with a little girl named Juliet waking up at midnight, telling her parents that she heard footsteps on the roof that seemed suspicious to her. Believing that it was just a dream, her mother accompanies the little girl to bed, and taking advantage of the fact that Christmas is approaching, she invents that these footsteps may have been Santa Claus's elves, who were inspecting the land so that everything would go well on the day of the delivery of gifts. Because the sounds wouldn't stop, the little girl got up and walked to the stairs, finding that someone dressed as Santa was taking an axe out of his sack, and fearing to be seen, she hid for a while. This would be the moment when the subject enters Juliet's brother's room and rips him to pieces, then goes to the parents' room, finishing off the man. And although the mother tries to run, she has the same fate as the previous two. After eating the cookies that had been left for Santa and washing the dishes, because the fact that you are a psychopath does not take away your manners, Art hears a sound coming from the cupboard, finding little Juliet hiding, and the moment is cut short. Now we travel 5 years into the past, and we end up seeing a police officer arriving at the carnival where Sienna and Jonathan manage to defeat Art, and in fact, he still finds the body of the art clown there. The cop investigates the area a little more, but what he doesn't count on is that Art's body is going to reanimate and finish him off in just an instant, and that not being enough for him, he even steals the cop's head and gets on the train. At the psychiatric hospital, Chris Jericho realizes that his partner simply didn't return to see the patients, so when he approaches Victoria's cell, he realizes that both Vicky and Art's head were swallowing the worker, and although the guy tries to run for his life, this is impossible, because the formula is added to Art's body, which had arrived at the hospital to get his new head. Both Art and Victoria take the train again and head to the clown's lair, where the guy caresses his tools a bit and then sits in a rocking chair to meditate on things that are surely not very good, while Victoria, after looking at herself in the mirror, makes the decision to get into a tub, take a piece of glass, and end up her life. Now we return to the present. In this part, we learn that Sienna has been in psychiatric recovery for 5 years after the events of the past story. But that is over. In fact, her uncle comes to pick her up to take her to live at his house so she can get her normal life back. Upon arriving home, Sienna is greeted by her niece, Gabby, who has the same artistic outlook as her, and her aunt also welcomes her with a warm hug. In another scene, we can see 2 workers arriving at the house that serves as Art's refuge to demolish it. But first, they start inspecting the site. The men come across both Art and Victoria, who have been in that place for 5 years, and as we suspected, they were only in some kind of strange dream. As soon as they come into contact with these guys, they proceed to finish them off in the most twisted ways possible. At Sienna's uncle's house, the family was having dinner and talking quietly, thinking about how wonderful Christmas would be now that everyone was together again. The strange thing about this part is that Sienna has a vision with the friend who was beaten by Art at the carnival, who tells her that the fact that she's now fine is because of her. She's right? Although at the moment we're given a glimpse that these visions are the fault of the traumas experienced 5 years ago, it's still not clear if they have any truth. On the other hand, we're also going to see that Jonathan is already going to college and that he's become quite popular among people because he's one of the few people who has survived an encounter with Art. And in fact, another of the students invites him to her podcast to tell his experience, although the boy doesn't seem to be very excited about this, let's say. Continuing with Art's adventures, while the guy was there looking for something to do, he came across a bar where a guy dressed as Santa Claus, one of those you find in any mall, was hanging around getting drunk. So, excited, Art went into the place and played around a bit with the customers and also with the bartender. Santa turned out to be so cool that he even offered Art a few shots, but the latter, going too far, spit the drink in Santa's face and also peed on his leg, which made everyone get upset and try to chase Art out of the bar. What they didn't know is that you can't fool around with this guy, and after he pulls a gun out of the bag he always carried, he finishes off the bartender and the random guy and proceeds to tie Santa to a chair and keep his suit. Now we should call him Arta Claus, or Santa Art, well, whatever. The clown pulls a tank of liquid nitrogen out of his bag, and without caring about Santa's prayers, he proceeds to spray it like there's no tomorrow, freezing the poor guy's limbs, and then hammers him to death, finishing him off. At the family home, Sienna was writing a little in her diary, confessing that she is very happy to spend time with them again. Between the pages of the book, Sienna keeps a letter written by Jonathan, in which the boy reminds her that they must finish off that ghostly girl who escaped from them at the carnival since he was sure that she was an incarnated demon. The boy assures that the only person who can stop her is Sienna, since he assures that when a demon enters this earthly plane, a contrary force capable of stopping it is also born, and he is sure that it is his sister. The next day, Sienna runs off with Gabby to a nearby square for an afternoon of spending as if money were infinite and of crazy consumerism. This is the moment in which the protagonist's world would come to a standstill again, as she can see a masked guy dressed as a clown walking in front of the store where she was, although after a while he disappears, leaving it unclear whether this was the real Art or if it was just a hallucination of Sienna. After a few hours, Sienna heads to Jonathan's university to see him after a couple of years, and halfway through the conversation, the boy's podcast partner finds them chatting, and like a total pest of the worst kind, she questions Sienna how she was taking her all this time. Getting carried away by her emotions, she proceeds to yell at her that she has been in and out of the mental hospital for years, that she has visions of her family and friends who no longer exist, and that she has such horrible scars that she has to see them every morning, so she can imagine how she was handling her. Trying to calm things down, Jonathan takes his sister away from the dining room, and this is the moment when some interesting things are revealed. From the start, we see that Jonathan was obsessed with the subject of demonology for several years, which is why he managed to conclude that only Sienna could stop this evil. In addition, Sienna reads another part of Jonathan's letters, where the boy assures that when a demon wants to go to this plane, they usually cling to subjects that serve as a bridge between both worlds. But it couldn't be just any subject, but someone depraved and sinister, someone like Art. So in the first part, Art was an ordinary person who was brought back to life by this entity. Somehow, Sienna concludes that her father was preparing her to face this evil, and that in fact the demon that entered this world, thanks to Art, is the macabre girl that we were seeing in part 2, who is now inside Victoria Heiss's body. Meanwhile, Art reappears in the mall, proving that it was not a vision of Sienna. This guy was the real one. Usurping the identity of Santa Claus, the guy sneaks into this place where the Santa paid by the store was interacting with the little ones. And although one might think that the clown was going to do something crazy in front of the people, in reality, he is not, because he starts handing out toys to the kids. However, the security guard of the place notices this and kicks Art out of the place. All this while the kids are opening their presents, and seconds later, Art is an explosion, as the Hydra guy would say. After several hours, Sienna returns home with what appears to be a present, and so that no one notices what she is doing, she approaches the Christmas tree slowly, but Gabby manages to see her, noticing that her hands are full of dirt, which tells us that Sienna went to dig up a secret tool that will help us later. Through a random conversation, where Gabby throws out a piece of information she shouldn't know, Sienna realizes that the little girl has been reading her personal diary and therefore has found out about the whole Art thing, the confrontation at the carnival and all that. And although the little girl asks if that magic sword she talks about was real, Sienna lies and says no, that she sometimes sees things that aren't real, and she writes them in her diary to get them out of her mind. Continuing with his misdeeds, Art sneaks into Jonathan's university, to be more precise, to the dormitory area, where a conversation between Mia, that is, the girl from the podcast, and her boyfriend Cole. Art thought that Jonathan was there, so it's just a matter of time before he starts harassing him. At the same time, the family found out about the incident at the mall. Being the moment where Sienna confirms that it hadn't been a hallucination, Art really was there. Sienna contacts Jonathan to inform him about what happened, and knowing that things are about to get chaotic, he promises that he will go to his uncle's house so that they can defend themselves if they need it. At the university, the most horrendous thing was yet to happen, because while Mia and Cole were taking a shower and making out, Art shows up to scare the shit out of him. He takes a chainsaw out of his trash bag, and in the purest Leatherface style, he turns both of them into mincemeat in what I think is the strongest scene in the saga, competing hand-to-hand with what happens to Allie in part 2. The boy's uncle rushes to the school to go get Jonathan, but when he calls him on the phone, you can hear the boy's voice change at times, implying that he is no longer Jonathan. While Sienna was sleeping for a bit, she has a rather revealing dream. in which she remembers the moment when her father gave her the drawing of that Valkyrie or angel or whatever and designated her as her character, telling her that this warrior can defeat anyone she sets her mind to. That moment becomes surreal when Sienna sees a kind of demon forging the armor that the warrior was wearing. All this while the entity is being watched by a virgin in one of the most disturbing scenes I remember seeing in many years. Due to this strange dream, Sienna wakes up, managing to hear a conversation between her uncles in which they plan to send the protagonist back to the psychiatric hospital in the middle of Christmas. Angry about this, the girl goes out to complain to them, but oh surprise, those were not her uncles. They were Art and Victoria, who just seeing her put her to sleep with a blow. As soon as she wakes up, Sienna can see her aunt tied up in front of her, and the uncle has been decapitated and nailed to one of the walls. These two psychopaths show the woman a small head, saying that it was Gabby, which drives the poor aunt crazy. The lady is, how do I put it, forced to eat a rodent for dessert, and then they kill her. Despite this, it is revealed that Gabby is still alive, and that the skull is not hers. Oh well, that's all good then. No, because that skull was Jonathan's. The entity that was inside Victoria tries to change that body for Sienna's. However, the will of the protagonist is so strong that this is impossible. Without being useful to them, this pair tries to finish off Sienna, although by chance they allow her to open a gift that was supposedly from Gabby. But no, because inside there was the legendary sword, a sword with which Sienna manages to decapitate Victoria and face Art for several minutes. In a twist that I simply did not see coming, Victoria's blood creates a kind of hellish portal on the ground into which Gabby ends up falling, managing to grab onto a random piece of wood that was lying around. At the same time, Sienna had Art pinned to the wall, giving signs that he was about to be defeated for good. Making a difficult decision, Sienna is forced to try to save her niece, and using the sword she asks her to hold on so she can pull her up. But her efforts are useless, and the girl ends up falling into that hole, taking the sword with her. Poor Sienna was now without a family, without a sword, and with Art still out there, although her regenerative powers were still intact. In the final scene, we are shown Art waiting at the bus stop. As he gets on the bus, we can see one of the passengers reading a book called The Ninth Circle, the title of the short film, where Art appears for the first time. References, and after giving us to understand that this guy's madness is not over yet, and that we will surely have a fourth part, we finish the story. Damn, what a great story, man. I got emotional and everything, man. What an epic ending, huh? It's amazing how the more movies in this saga go by, the better they get. Let's hope they don't screw it up in the fourth one. I'm interested in them answering two questions. The first is, why is Sienna the chosen one? And if there's some kind of blood power that's passed down from generation to generation or something like that. And the second is that they clarify if Jonathan was really stiff, and if not, I require that the guy have more prominence because it is clear that he has a lot of potential. I don't need to sleep, I need answers. But hey, that's my opinion. Let me know what you think in the comments. I promise I'll read them.